The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit enables security teams to detect risky user activity, investigate incidents in minutes, and effectively respond. Get your free trial at observit.com/securityweekly. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies. Protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week, Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Security teams need network data to threat hunt and resolve incidents, but find that PCAP is often too much data and NetFlow isn't enough. Corelight was founded by the creators of Zeek, formerly Bro, and its sensors provide just the right amount of data, transforming raw traffic into comprehensive logs, extracted files, and custom insights so analysts can make fast sense of traffic and move at the speed of attack. To find out why Corelight is your best next move in security, visit securityweekly.com/Corelight.
Welcome to Security Weekly. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and we are recording live day 2 at Black Hat 2019. We're in the suite at Mandalay Bay. Joining me for this interview is Jason Brvenik, CEO at NSS Labs.
How you doing?
Welcome. We see lots of your reports. What we're going to talk about is the importance of independent third-party testing.
All right.
And let's start a little bit with the history of NSS Labs, just quickly, for those who don't know NSS Labs. I think a lot of us in the community do, but just give us a little background on NSS Labs.
A little background on NSS. 2007, 2008, did our first group test. Group test is an independent assessment of products in a given category. It was for intrusion detection systems. I don't know if you remember, IDSs are dead now, but in 2008, the best product was achieving 50% coverage, roughly, of known published attacks. Right? And so that wasn't quite good enough. Nowadays, we see NGFWs operating on the order of 95, 98% of known attacks, but there's a number of opportunities for improvement there.
Yeah, got it. And so as we think about independent testing, right, you pointed out something very interesting. Back in the day, had a product, best product was doing 50%. Next-gen firewalls, very mature technology. 95%. But now we've got all these new technologies. There's new markets popping up all the time.
Right.
And as we think about that, where does NSS Labs think it's about? When do you test? What's the maturity curve of the market first to say, yeah, it's really time to test a bunch of these products? How early or kind of where in the maturity cycle do they sit?
There's an art to that. In engaging with our enterprise clients, we tend to look to the areas where they're trying to answer some questions. Security's difficult. And we have the expertise to build environments that allow us to assess emergent technologies. But if you're too early, then you can ultimately put out a report that says, the technology's not quite right, and keep it there. And so it really becomes when the enterprises, and the larger enterprises, candidly, are interested in understanding what the capabilities of the products really are.
Got it. So EDR is pretty mature, pretty interesting. I think you guys have done some recent testing there. But other technologies, maybe like container security, not quite there yet?
Interesting. In cloud, we're seeing, container security, the DevOpsy stuff, and cloud native has all the hype, but all the enterprises are doing lift and shifts. None of them are ready to go cloud native. And so we're really seeing workloads move into, hybrid cloud environments. We're not seeing containerization take off for the enterprise environment. I think that's really the legacy movement of their applications and the workloads.
I had the old stuff on-prem. I'm just going to take it as is, put it into the cloud, say I'm cloud.
Right.
But it's running on a dedicated EC2 instance.
Exactly. And so cloud workload protection is where we're hearing very much the interest from the enterprise.
Got it. And that is a little more mature market than something like a container security and sort of those things.
Well, then you have things like SD-WAN, which came out of nowhere and is just out there everywhere, and everybody's adopting rapidly. That's a rapidly moving, fast-growing market that seems to be showing some really good value. Interestingly, though, a lot of the incumbents are very well capable and delivering security on top rather than net new technologies. So we just got done with our second round of SD-WAN testing. Very interesting results there.
Oh, interesting. So why an independent third-party test?
A number of reasons. One, building a lab to assess security is difficult, time-consuming.
Paul and I used to do it. We tried to do it. When
It's
we were
hard.
at Tenable together, we had a lab, and we had products in the lab, and we tried to do some of that. But you're right, it's difficult.
And it's hard to keep the cadence, keep up with cyber in the first place. So organizations doing it on their own, difficult. Using a VAR, typically a vested interest.
Yeah.
Using a lab that will accept your criteria, come to you, and observe you executing on a test is maybe not as independent as an enterprise would like. Right. The independent testing allows us to listen to the enterprise, develop criteria that they care about, execute it regardless of industry interest, and answer their questions directly. An example of that would be, we're hearing from enterprises for multiple years now for NGFWs that they very much want to understand why their users are still getting compromised, even though they have these great NGFWs. You break it down in the simplest of form, the enterprise expects the NGFW to protect the user from the internet. But what they were finding, and we found in our testing, is that not a single NGFW handles any script-based issues. So the attacker can fundamentally deliver exploits to an endpoint using JavaScript unprotected.
Undetected
Yeah.
and unprotected.
Correct. It's an interesting dynamic, though, because you don't want to hold an industry accountable for something they don't do.
Right.
But the enterprise wanted to understand the bounds of what the technology could do so they could go seek technologies that can solve that problem.
Right. No, it's interesting because I wouldn't have expected the next gen firewall to be the silver bullet anyways, if you think about it in some respects, right? I don't think there's any one silver bullet technology. And as we see users coming off the network and being more remote in certain cases, they're not necessarily going through a firewall
At
either,
all,
right?
right,
Yeah. So why an expectation that the firewall was going to protect all this stuff? And so if I think about differentiation of testing from a VAR, vested interest because they're trying to sell you a product, doing it yourself, which is really difficult, or going out to an independent body. I think what makes you guys really unique is you're not necessarily beholden to anyone per se.
Yeah.
So then, is it really in the criteria creation and the ability to really build a broad set of tests across the test group that you're trying to test against, and just really give just just pure feedback on, this works and this doesn't work? Is that really where the value is?
That is really where the value is, but we still have a responsibility. We could go after a technology and find that it just doesn't do anything that people are looking for. I think in our last advanced endpoint protection, for example, we were able to circumvent protections on every one of these technologies, cause them themselves to shut down. There's an argument to be made. We used administrative rights in some cases, but pretty much everybody's administrator of the machine anyway, so not really a blocker to an attacker's behavior. But it's hard to argue there isn't value in the technologies, even if they don't do everything they say they do.
Right.
And so really it's just drawing good, clear differentiation between what the different product capabilities are.
Right.
So an enterprise can fill the right gaps.
Yeah. So what are some of the really interesting insights you've seen over the last 6 months? I mean, you talked about the advanced endpoint and some of the next-gen firewall. What's some of the other testing that you've done to really give us an idea of where certain trends are going? Which technologies are people really serious about adopting? Because I can tell you right now, there's a ton of financial analysts sitting out there going, what's next, right? Because I get those calls every week of, can you do this briefing on this, that, or the other thing? They're all trying to figure out where that next wave of technology might be coming to the public market.
Right.
What are you seeing through testing? What's that kind of next wave look like?
Well, so we're seeing consolidation of the security stack for operational efficiencies. People are realizing they can't operate multiple best-of-breed technologies, integrate them, and achieve their goals.
Yeah.
We did a breach prevention test that looked at a lot of that and integrated many of the observable elements from the different tests. There's a number of strong suite-based security technologies out there that are really good. And there's a number of potential integration points between other best-of-breedy technologies. But we're also seeing that consolidation drive a number of other behaviors. You mentioned EDR, for example. People don't want additional agents. They don't want additional things to manage.
We've been hearing that story for a long time, though, right?
And so there was a big gap in visibility that EDR filled, but we're seeing the newest endpoint technologies really close that gap pretty well.
If you truly could build an endpoint agent that's doing prevention, detection, response, and all those capabilities, and remove a number of agents off the box, that's got to be a win for the customers, right?
It does, yeah.
But are we there yet? I mean, I could think of a couple vendors that are close, right? But in general, are those technologies mature enough to really be that kind of single agent, endpoint agent technology?
It's debatable for sure. The alternative is operationally. Are we there yet that we can consume all that information from multiple stacks anyway?
True. Yeah, because now where am I going to send all that data?
Exactly.
Right. So you talk about some of the suites. There have been some interesting acquisitions this year and even into late last year where you're starting to see some of the bigger vendors in the space start to consolidate a lot of capabilities under the umbrella. Obviously, we'll see how those products come out in these new suites. But I do agree that there are a lot of enterprises, especially the small to medium enterprises, who aren't going to have the staff to manage lots of different tools. So if they can go to a single vendor and buy a bunch of capabilities that are all integrated together from an operational ease perspective, that's got to be a good thing for them.
And that's really what we're seeing, especially in cloud delivered management, because it gets beyond the borders, follows users where they are, helps with the visibility. And we're seeing some pretty good capabilities as well there.
So I assume we see some interesting markets still consolidating. Any thoughts on where some of those trends are? I have some thoughts where I could I would like to see some consolidation. But are you seeing some of these markets kind of ripe for consolidation based on what you've seen on the testing side?
I would peg endpoint as the market most ripe for consolidation. It's a pretty big incumbent space.
Yeah.
With lots of disruption.
Oh, yeah.
Heavily invested in. And if you look at the market cap of some of these incumbents, just the opportunity isn't there for everybody.
Yeah.
So we're going to see some consolidation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what are there, 85 plus EDR guys, right? I mean, you can't, and two of them are public now, plus you've got, one of the old stand guards in the endpoint space, been public for a long time. So, yeah, I mean, there's got to be something going on in that space.
That's the one I'm expecting just to, I don't want to say collapse, but congeal.
Yes, it's a good way to put it. So any examples of independent testing results to improve their defenses? How you're out evaluating technology. Enterprises are consuming this. How are they leveraging your data then to actually improve?
Yeah, that's a good one. So traditionally we would do annual group tests. Every year we would test the same technology stacks or domains, NGFW is an example. Vendors, of course, put their best foot forward. And you can look at a group test as a roughly 80% coverage of a market. But the enterprise always has unique needs. And we're seeing two dynamics in the enterprise. One, annually isn't enough for them anymore.
Oh.
They want to see results much more often.
Is it quarterly yet?
It's getting close.
Okay.
It's getting close where they're looking to see the results, but they want to see the results of their systems and their systems as they've deployed them. Not just as the vendor thinks is the best possible, but as they've deployed them. And we've seen differences on the order of 50% between what's the art of the possible if deployed perfectly and what's the art of the real when deployed in production environments.
So how do you test for that? I mean, do you now have to go into the enterprise environment?
No. We have an environment, a continuous test environment that they deploy as a virtual remote office. And it is continuously subjected to all of our testing capabilities. And then we'll layer in our evasions, our performance, and everything else on top of. But what they're really interested in is how well their security stack is handling any of the threats we identify. The other trend we're seeing is vendors not in our test, enterprises bringing us their product and wanting to see the results. Right? They're no longer willing to wait. They're no longer willing to deal with it. They'll just send it over.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Where does testing go from here? Do we see more of this as the market continues to mature? I mean, I still think security is still a little immature in some respects. Do we see more of this continuing?
I think we see validation pick up steam. The ability for a CISO to at least wake up in the morning and answer the question, what am I doing next? And what I've done, is it working?
Right.
Without testing, regardless of where you get it, whether it's internal teams, external teams, or attackers, whether or not it really works is kind of an open question until a breach occurs.
Exactly.
All right.
So how do you cover the technologies I have that I think are protecting me and what's on the horizon that I'm going to have to deploy in my environment as things continue to morph and change? Because there is a lot of change in these enterprises, as you've talked about with lift and shift, and then eventually, containerization, which hasn't gone the way we maybe thought it would, but that's going to change what people have to worry about protecting in the future. If testing's a great way to validate these products so they know what to buy, obviously you're helping the CISO build a better security program.
Very much so, very much so. And at the end of the day, people simply want to know what they can do to improve. Right?
Right.
They know they have security. They know they have capabilities. They know they have a talent shortage. Our technologies in security have not been user-friendly. They're improving greatly.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to inadvertently click a box and change your protection profile entirely and not know it. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what people are wanting to know. How can they improve? How can they identify? What are the little things?
Yeah. Are CISOs making major technology changes in security based on the results they're seeing?
I am seeing CISOs consider consolidation of their technology stack, eliminating an IPS or a firewall or duplication or an endpoint or a WAF, rather than try to expand and have more coverage, realizing that just the blocking and tackling and perfecting the art of the blocking and tackling will get them far better than the technology that solves the latest whatever.
Yeah, that's actually interesting if you think about it for a second, right? Is that they're using these testing results to make decisions about improving their current capabilities, but not really looking to expand yet. And, I think that's good for people to make sure that their products are still effective once they've been bought and installed in the environment. So vendors, look out, right? You're still getting tested even after the sale is done, because if you want the renewal, you've got to do it.
I saw a number of renewals this year go very different directions based on results.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so I think that's really good for the vendor community to know, because a lot of these companies spend so much time to acquire the customer and then get their stuff installed, and they're thinking, okay, I'm the incumbent, I'm going to get the renewal because rip and replace is expensive. But if CISOs are actually making those decisions based on test results, then testing is actually going to make all the vendors that are out there, I think, better to make sure that they continue to hit a certain baseline of capabilities to stay in the environment, which is good.
In one of our, I won't use any names, but in one of our test domains, a vendor didn't show up, actively avoided. The enterprise said, we want to see it. So they sent us a box, got a private engagement, understood their own results, and I understand right now there's a $40 million deployment happening as a result to replace them.
To replace them.
To replace them.
Wow. Interesting.
So simply not being there can be bad.
It can be bad as well. Yeah, people want to see the results, and if CISOs are using this to make decisions, be prepared.
Yeah, and everybody understands nothing's perfect, right?
Yeah.
But they want to see people care and push to do better.
Right.
Not just in their internal environments, but in their suppliers.
Yeah.
If they don't feel like they have that partnership, they don't feel like they can be successful, they'll go find the people that do.
Oh, very interesting. Jason, if anybody wants to learn more about NSS Labs, where should they go?
NSSLabs.com, of course.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome, everyone. We're here at Black Hat, day 2 in 2019 of this fabulous conference and wonderful interview series. We're having so much fun. And I am so excited because one of my former co-workers at Tenable is here with us today. And I can't wait to talk about what you and I used to do in the past and what you're doing today. Mehul Revankar, He is the Senior Product Manager at SaltStack. Mehul, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show. Yeah,
Now,
it's a pleasure.
It's interesting, there's a bit of history. We've done podcasts together, but on the Tenable Network Security podcast, not the Security Weekly podcast, Mehul and I, and you've heard me say this on the show, he's actually here now. He's a real person, not in my imagination, that we work together very closely. At Tenable, you would develop features inside the product. I would test them. I would give you feedback, and ultimately they would be released so that it was interesting, essentially, so people could test the configurations of their systems. So it wasn't surprising that you went over to SaltStack.
We spend a lot of time at Tenable finding vulnerabilities, configuration issues, compliance violations, and so on. And then, SaltStack seemed like a natural transition for my career to actually go out and now fix these things, right? Because when I used to talk to our, our customers, they said, you're doing such a great job, but now can you help me fix these things?
Yes.
And I almost didn't have a good answer to that. I mean, you could always provide like a report, a remediation report. I mean, these are the things you need to do, but somebody still had to go out and do these things for you, right? And manual scripts, bash files, like manually running commands and whatnot. And SaltStack has been doing it for maybe 8 or 9 years for their entire existence, for updating packages, installing packages, restarting services, and so on and so forth. Sort of super natural transition for me to go there. So super excited to be here.
It's so awesome, and I love the platform, and I think you hit already on one of the major differences between configuration auditing, right, and configuration management.
Right.
The management side you speak of that's in the SaltStack product allows you to change the configuration.
Right.
And today there are so many different configurations for so many. I mean, DevOps is just one example. You end up with so many configuration files. Now I got to go manually change all those. Like, no, like you're saying, we're going to tell you what's wrong.
Right.
And then we're going to allow you to manage the fixing and remediation of that, right?
Right. And we'll also allow you so that, what we have seen from our customers, there is a very strict boundary between your work. Like, the security teams, their responsibility is to actually just assess, not remediate. And the ops team comes in and says, don't touch my systems. I'm going to fix it. Right. So that's one challenge. And the second is, the infrastructure when you and I worked together was very limited. VMs pretty much.
More static. There wasn't.
You had your data center, and then you come out into this new modern infrastructure that has gone to like network devices, IoT, containers, cloud, data centers, and so on. And to manage these configurations across these number of devices and services is an insanely complex problem. Remediation is actually a very hard problem. But the good thing is SaltStack has been doing it for such a long time. It's very natural and easy for us.
Right.
And the good thing is, like, the vendors who actually do the assessment, they feel comfortable handing us off the job. Here's my scan that came in. Here's the ServiceNow ticket. And now here's the thing you guys need to do. And then we are the action arm to actually go out and fix these things for you.
Yeah. And so what are the benefits to understanding your configuration and making changes? I think some people think it's just about compliance, and there is an aspect of compliance. I think some people think it probably breaks stuff more so than a lot of other things. So I don't want to go change my configuration just for security. I want to change it if there's functionality, right? But I think there's some real benefits that I've seen in my career to managing, controlling, in implementing configuration management that I think has been lost somewhat. I'm not sure. Or tied to compliance, where people are like, oh, compliance, I fall asleep, right?
So what I've seen is, configuration management is a very wide space, and there are a lot of vendors who claim to do configuration management. But, from our perspective, configuration management also means providing content to go along with it. We see a lot of vendors come out and say, yeah, we do configuration management, but then, go to this random GitHub repo and download this recipe or playbook or runbook and just apply it across your infrastructure, and everything should be just fine.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the engine that can reach out and push and pull configurations, and what you're saying is the content is the library of what configurations we can check for, what's good, what's bad.
Right.
You're providing that to your customers with your development team.
Exactly.
It's not, a GitHub
it's
or
not
Contribute
outsourced. It's not. And and the good thing is, no one company is the same. Like, everyone is going to have their own small tweaks and changes that need from the recommendations that come in from something like CIS or
Yeah.
DisSTAG.
Yeah.
And we also provide them that flexibility without writing a single line of code. They can just come into the product either through API or the UI, and I want my CIS would recommend the password authentication try should be 5, and they could say we could set it to 3, and make it stricter or lax from there, and make it their own from there, right? Or if you don't, if you are at a point where you can start to use our library, and you can also bring in your own content to do these things in your environment and create your own custom policy, which is derived from an industry standard.
Right.
Which is
That's what we always talked about at Tenable. I always liked having a starting point,
exactly,
right, for you to work from, and then apply that to because your environment's going to be different pockets of your environment are going to have in areas, your DevOps and servers in the cloud and on-prem, like they all might have slightly different configurations.
And even the way you communicate with these different devices, like the way you communicate with databases, is completely different than how you communicate with operating systems or network devices, right? So it's very difficult.
Yeah, and you support more devices than a lot of other folks in terms of it's not just the operating system or the application, but it's also databases, routers, switches, those kinds of things.
So SaltStack, the company itself, is built on the open source platform Salt, which is a Python-based framework. And the unique thing about us is we take a YAML file as input, right, and as directions on what we need to do. And so we can be agent-based, agentless, API-based, and so on and so forth. And as long as you can describe what your requirement is for whatever compliance or configuration management that you want to do for databases, network devices, containers, operating systems, hypervisors, it doesn't really matter because our engine can consume that and take the action based on it.
That's awesome. And I mean, that's a feat of engineering to have that much flexibility, right, to support that many different platforms without changing a whole bunch of code.
Exactly,
on the back end,
and we've been at it for maybe 7 or 8 years. We have had millions of downloads of the Salt Open tool that we have, thousands of contributors to our open source engine. So it gets better every day, and things that the Salt community takes for granted, like package management, like installing packages, updating packages, is pretty robust in our infrastructure, and we can do this across like network devices. So installing or updating firmwares for network devices is extremely complex thing, like super complex. In the because you cannot go from like firmware version 1 to 5 directly. You have to go from version 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, right? And that requires a lot of automation and orchestration to get through. And we've had a lot of customers who we have saved 14 man years by just automating and orchestrating the whole thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that the real crux of the issue here is that my famous quote, or maybe not so famous, but my quote is misconfiguration leads to compromise. Right? And I think that we spend a lot of time focusing on, do we have encryption? Do we have patches installed? And, do we have strong authentication? And those things are important, but a misconfiguration in really anything that we've talked about in terms of infrastructure applications can give an attacker an opportunity to compromise that system. In fact, I loved configuration exposures because I didn't rely on a missing patch or even a credential, just that configuration that goes, well, I don't need credentials. I don't need an exploit. Really, because you misconfigured it, I can just access it with nothing, without credentials. I mean,
some of the major breaches that we have seen have come because of S3 misconfiguration. Like Amazon S3, you can just go in, download all the data, has all the sensitive data in there. No one had to ever run a scan or do something on it. Just poke around and you find a weak configuration, and you are with all the data you're trying so hard to protect. And it's all there.
Well, it's interesting how the misconfiguration leads to exposures, right? And in one of our own instances we experienced, we pushed up our Docker containers and accidentally left the Docker API exposed to the internet.
Oh, wow.
So you fix that, as you know, right, with a configuration change.
Yep.
So because there was no checks and balances on that configuration, that can lead to getting owned very, very quickly, right? Thankfully, we found it fast, but it's configuration in auditing and managing your configuration that's going to prevent those things from happening.
Right. I mean, there are scripts that are actually running around the clock looking for these things, like in GitHub, credentials in GitHub, and as soon as they find it, like within minutes, your AWS test, and you start to see Bitcoin
Right.
mining going right away. It's
But
like,
that's a great, I think, endorsement for the platform you described, because while the attackers are looking for it fast and furious, you're also doing the same thing, right? When I noticed a configuration change that exposes a Docker container,
Mhm.
right, it's SaltStack that's telling me, hey, you did that, go fix it, and hopefully I can go fix it before an
somebody,
attacker gets it, right?
Before
Yeah.
an attacker gets in, and we have some really good modules which we call beacons and reactors, so that you can set up so that you can monitor these things.
Right.
And if
you can automate it. I can say if Docker is exposed to the internet, like change that configuration and then send someone an alert, so I can remediate automatically.
Yeah, so we have our reactor module in
Mhm.
Salt, which essentially allows you to define conditions. So if you see these things happen, like if you see telnet running ever, just
Mhm.
go and fix it.
Right, right.
And, we'll go ahead and fix it. Like, ever. Like if we see a patch with a critical vulnerability, just patch it. If you want to, you can do it. I mean, our
Yeah.
framework itself is
I know,
super.
it's cliche to say self-healing, but it's really kind of what you're describing,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
there are some organizations which are mature enough to do that level of change. Some
Yeah.
require more hand-holding than
Mhm.
others, but yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can do it with
That's
SaltStack.
awesome. Now, you also have an announcement that you've made here at Black Hat that you're going to be supporting some patching.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, as I talked with you about this, I said, really, a missing patch is more just like a configuration, right? It is really an extension of a misconfiguration of the system.
It's an extension of the configuration management use case. Configuration management is talking about having the right patch levels and so on
Mhm.
and so forth. So one thing, this is the first time we're publicly announcing on a show, Security Weekly, that we're also introducing.
Heard it here first.
Yep, it's right here first. Is we're introducing our vulnerability remediation module for SaltStack SecOps that's coming out in September. And we'll be talking about it more in detail. I think we have an interview later on.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
so
But
that
how happy are you now that you get to help people change their configuration and automatically remediate, and now extend that same capability to patching?
for
right?
patching,
Is that the goal?
that's the goal. And
Mhm.
this essentially allows us to now become the action arm to fix things. A lot of company talks about risk and vulnerabilities and so on, but they don't actually help you remediate things.
Yeah.
And now we can actually come in and remediate things for you. And remediation, by the way, is very hard.
Oh,
like
yeah.
across a wide variety of systems is very hard.
Like, raise your hand if you ever broke anything changing a configuration or applying a patch,
Right,
right? Like,
and-
I've made some big mistakes there.
And we have
15,000 people without email. Oops.
but from our perspective, we have snapshotting capabilities. We have our unique engine where you can segregate systems into various environments like test, production, UAT before start to roll out all these patches. So,
I agree. Especially in DevOps, it's a lot easier today because of the containerization and ephemeral. You can spin it up, make sure it tests well and passes all the tests. If it does, spin it down, move on to the next.
Move on to
right?
the next
Yeah.
level, and we facilitate all of that. And we take when we look at I usually look at the vulnerability management use case, a lot of drop off happens between the sec and ops handoff. They'll scan the systems, they'll find maybe 100,000 vulnerabilities, they'll export it in Excel sheet and then lob it over to the ops guy. Hey, go fix it, and the ops guy is not figuring out what do I fix here.
Right.
And
they've got a management tool for this and a management tool for that.
They don't
and
talk to each
this
other.
patching, and then I got third-party apps, and maybe it includes it, maybe it doesn't, but it doesn't support Linux. Maybe it does. Maybe then the configurations are totally different. So
Exactly.
now they can consolidate all that on one
Consolidate
platform.
all
yeah.
of it in a single platform, and use SaltStack to actually go ahead and fix things for you, which is very powerful in some sense. Our customers look at it. You made it so easy that it's scary, because you've made
Right.
it. How did you make it work so fast? And that's credit to our underlying platform at SaltStack. We've spent a lot of time, and a lot of people have contributed to what we are here, and super exciting to actually build products that customers want and use and want to pay for.
Awesome. We've talked on the show in the past about the differences between free and commercial, so I encourage our audience to go check it out.
Yep.
If you haven't, the free version's great to get started with. I also encourage get a demo. of the commercial version, because if you're working for an enterprise
Yep.
and don't have something like this, it's
Mhm.
definitely something you have to look into.
Yeah, I mean, go try out. We are, open source is obviously free, and our betas are starting to roll out for SaltStack Enterprise 6.1 in the next few weeks. So sign up for beta, try it out as much time as you want. We'll give you all the licenses that you need, and then, we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Mehul, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.